The great chicken waffles and anyway, but we're here. So I'm going to introduce Kelly. That was a really wordy intro, but essentially Kelly is helping our go-to-market strategy for public sector. So that's what she's focused on. Prior to coming to Adobe, Kelly was at GSA, and at GSA she was responsible for the technology transformation. And really it was and this is really tough. I know we talk about Tennessee and all these various different agencies, but it's around how do you work across multiple departments. So she was responsible for build, buy, share, a lot of these really complex tasks, and that's her background. She was also recognized by Lee Tell, Washington executive, FedScoop, as one of the top IT executives in Washington. And she's been at Adobe 1,152 hours. Now here's the nerd in me. If she's from the East Coast, would it be 1,155 hours? Just wondering. So ask her a really hard Adobe question because she's been here a long time. So just, anyway, just joking on that. But so Kelly, why did you come to Adobe?
Well, I love what you're doing with the city of Las Vegas and technology and innovation. Such cool stories. Thank you for doing that. And Max is truly driving change. It's hard, right? I just came from a decade of trying to do that at the U.S. General Services Administration. But Max, thank you for your service too, and everything that you're doing to move the government forward. So my background, I spent, as he said, I was at GSA for the last decade, and my most recent position was I was running the technology transformation service, and I have been at Adobe for 7 weeks. So getting up to speed on this, my journey's an interesting one. I absolutely love public service. I love government. I have met some of the most incredible, creative, passionate people that I have ever worked with in my life in federal service. The organization that I was working in and running was really put in place as a change driver across government. And we developed shared services, shared platforms across government. You've probably heard of some of them, data.gov, as policies and mandates were coming out of the last administration and this administration. That group was really tasked with helping the government move forward, digital transformation, IT modernization, and innovation. So, doing that, working across government, this was mostly just federal, but having that government-wide role and working with agencies to sort of tackle their problems and really start to understand their user was very eye-opening for me. And I feel like the federal government just recently started to understand, what is this customer experience thing, right? Is it just customer service? What does it mean? They've also started to recently adopt user-centered design and human-centered design approach to problem solving and process reengineering and service delivery. I became fascinated with it, and one thing I always wanted when I was in government is to understand what was going on the commercial side. I wanted to hear and see how they were doing their transformation, how they were serving their customers, and we never really had access to that. So it was hard, we never had the opportunity. So when this opportunity at Adobe came up to be truly the strategic bridge between the commercial success of digital experience to public sector, I could not pass it up. One, I had no idea what Adobe was doing in terms of digital experience, and when I started to dig in and realize that they were powering some of my favorite consumer experiences, it made so much sense to me. And it's like all of the gaps that I've seen across 10 years in government in terms of digital service delivery, agencies providing citizen information and services came together when I realized the capability and the way that the commercial side was truly innovating in this space. So I have the great role now of being able to really dive in and learn how they did it. Obviously, we have different drivers in government than on the commercial side, but there's so many transferable things. We've talked about culture and workforce, and right, it's way beyond just the technology. And so, gleaning insights from what I'm learning and transferring that to the tremendous potential in public sector to help them kind of bring all that back and transform. So that's how I got here. And it's been a very fun 7 weeks, and I'm having fun here at Summit.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Adobe and welcome to your first Summit. So the next question, everything about Summit is really around CX, or it's really around customer experience, right? So I think Michael said it best, and Max, you talked about the iPad. A scary stat is I think by 2022 or 2021, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And those are the last generation that maybe had 1 foot in analog, 1 foot in digital, but they're much more inclined to digital. So the whole experience of the people hitting the workforce will be people that are used to customer experience. So my question to you is, would just love to know, just because you're fresh from GSA, what's the government, like what do you think about customer experience, and what's your point of view on that?
It affects everything. I think Max was talking about workforce, Michael was talking about workforce. I think about the challenges that I faced every single day internally as an employee. It was barrier after barrier after barrier. It was so hard to do anything in government. And I think you look at customer experience kind of 2 ways. So as Max said, your internal customer, right, is your workforce, and that's critical. You have to get that right. And what I'm worried about is that next generation coming in. The organization that I was in, we were trying to recruit top talent, like the U.S. digital service model. We had tours of duty, so we were bringing people in from technology companies all over the country to come in and help. Right, it's like these service teams going into agencies and moving, trying to move them forward digitally and changing culture and changing the way they work. What I'm concerned about is if we don't fix this now, we're not going to be able to continue recruiting these people and retaining these folks to help fix government service delivery. I just think about my onboarding process at Adobe. Everything was digital. I didn't touch one piece of paper. It was the most incredible thing. I didn't even know that you could do this. You think about like the way that we recruit in government and the way that we onboard, and everything is so frustrating. So, I think when you look at your internal customer, that's super important, and you should start there. Obviously, that has to be right for them to actually be able to deliver, to their citizen, whoever their stakeholder or customer is. And I think the other really important piece here is that mind shift in government in terms of not changing based on what you think from an agency perspective, how you how you think things should change. It's really understanding that experience from the citizen that's trying to access a service or information from you, and then redesigning around that. And so again, I do feel that that's a newer concept to government generally. Probably state and locals are probably further advanced there, just because it's direct to citizen, and I feel like the federal side is a little bit more behind in sort of that mindset and designing in that way. But,
great. Yep. So from a state and local perspective, we're talking about innovation. Max, and just jokingly, I waited tables in college too. I've met my wife of 22 years. The worst nightmares I had in work was working at Spaghetti Factory. I called them spagmares because I would always bring the wrong dish to the wrong table or break a dish. So waiting tables is stressful when you're in college, and you are balancing a lot of different things. But what's neat about this room today from a state and local perspective is, what are the trends really in state and local? And what's interesting is we have Tennessee here, we have Sacramento. Tennessee's also working on a one-stop app, an Amazon-like experience. That's their goal. And in Sacramento, they're just starting this journey, but their goals are, things like how do we take youths and move them through these city programs and help create a better outcome. So in a lot of ways, we hear the word marketing a lot. That's a trend that we're seeing in the government. It's how do I market my services better? I'm going to be speaking, 2 Mondays from now in San Diego at the Public Information Officer for State of California, but they're now looking at digital advertising. So because social media is not quite working for them as well as they thought it would be, so how could they start recruiting people they're talking about? How do they start delivering a better message? Because people, even though you might build a great system, how do you draw people into your system and build that trust factor? So from a state and local perspective, we see those trends when it comes to that sort of digital transformation. The other trend we see that's really kind of the easiest start for most people in this room is, and it's also the hardest start, but is really getting your business more involved. And so what that means really is, if you're building this great digital property, how do you make your digital property actionable? So you might have this great transformation, but how do you make it actionable? And really what you need from the business is, what are the business drivers that they need for this digital property, show that these outcomes for children or people using this Tennessee mobile app. How do you show that it's actually benefiting in the long run, or maybe helping people who are potentially getting displaced by robots? How do you know that you're actually being effective? So I would say one of the first starts is really challenging your business to put together ideas on how you can make these digital properties more actionable. I know that's really hard. I mean, how hard is it in this room to work with a line of business sometimes and getting them to understand what you're doing? I mean, I would say that's kind of one of the trends I see, is that some of the leading innovators in IT are really aligning a lot tighter with their business and creating actionable areas. We have 42 seconds left, and we got some of our time taken away by, it was a much better speech, so I'm sure you learned a ton more. But any questions for Kelly or myself?
Yes.
I don't know if I need a microphone, but they may need it for the... Thank you. My name is Phil Klavork. I represent, I'm a representative of the Clark County government, so thank you for staying here, because this is actually county property, not the city, like Michael was disseminating wrong information. Much like what he does in the city, he's a good guy. I'll throw him under the bus with both axles. So I actually think you spilled spaghetti on me in Portland.
I did. That was where I worked.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn.
So this is the great thing about digital technology. I just looked you up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So, but the key is, and I tried to look up Kelly as well, but her thing is private. So one of the things that I think is important to understand is, one's a for-profit business, and government is not for profit. So going forward and trying to parlay private sector ideas into government is very cumbersome at best. And you'll find transitioning out of government into private sector is like, why can't government people open up their eyes? But there are people within government that I think are key factors that you need to just try to identify and wiggle way in there. And I'm one of those people, because within the county, and like what Michael does and things like that, there's a lot of opportunities to try to innovate within an organization. I do the economic development for the county, so it's more of a comment and a comedy routine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I used to say, I had to build the coalition of the willing across government to get anything done. People like Max and lots of other amazing change agents that I've worked with, but it is very difficult. It is, and I think focusing on the value, right? In government, it's different, right? The commercial side, their business could die if they don't focus on customer experience. In government, we have to shift the way that we're talking about it. And how can I save time? How can I make my employee experience better? How can I save money? And things like that. So how can I offer better service delivery? I feel like starting with CX in government, and because it's a great thing to do, right? Because we should do that. We're both consumers and practitioners in government right now trying to fix it. But that's not compelling enough of a business case or value or ROI to justify some of these things. I think you have to focus on the business drivers and cost savings. I mean, this is not budgeted for in government for the most part. So.
Thanks
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
I think we're 2 minutes over, so thank you.